Welcome everyone to Implementing QuickBooks Online with a Client, Setting Up QuickBooks Right. My name is Hector Garcia. I'm an advanced QuickBooks Pro advisor. I'm also known for my YouTube channel. So if you just search my name in YouTube, you will get to my YouTube channel. I have a lot of video content about QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Desktop, and other accounting related topics. There's my email address if you need to contact me for whatever reason, maybe something that was missed on the webinar or something like that. You can send your questions via email. However, I would love to be able to answer the questions live on the webinar. So make sure you use the questions box to ask any questions for things that we may not have covered during the presentation. The agenda for today is we'll talk about selecting the right version of QuickBooks for your client. We'll talk about the new setup process, whether you're setting up a company from scratch or converting from QuickBooks Desktop. Then we'll talk about the setup, what you need to do right after the file is created, whether you're importing from QuickBooks or you're going to set up the chart of accounts and the banks and all that stuff. And then we'll talk about some best practices for training and supporting your client, which is a huge opportunity of revenue and relationship building work you can do with your customers once you get them set up in QuickBooks Online. Now, some of the additional resources that you may also want to be on top of is on QuickBooks, on the QuickBooks Training Events website, which is qbtrainingevents.com. qbtrainingevents.com. You will have access to all the webinars that Intuit offers for free. There are some in-person training a couple times a year. Intuit sends a crew and brings people like me and other pro advisors that do training to do training on this on site. And there's also virtual conferences that happen 2 to 3 times a year, so also worth taking a look at. Now, on the QuickBooks blog, every month or every 2 months, you're going to see articles with updates to the software. QuickBooks Online is being updated 6 to 12 times a year with new features, so that's a great place to stay on top of everything about QuickBooks Online. And of course, the Firm of the Future blog, which is similar to the QuickBooks Online blog, but it covers other non-QuickBooks related topics like practice management, things that pertain to sort of the everyday digital accountant. So in order to get your CPE certificate, you have to attend the webinar live. You will get 1.5 hours of CPE in a certificate. It will be emailed to you within 3 weeks. Make sure to answer all the polling questions. We're going to ask 6 polling questions. You must answer all 6 of them in order to get your CPE certificate. So if you miss one, our system will not generate the CPE certificate. Okay, some of the admin details. So questions, I will take any questions you have. If they're not related to the content being covered, I will probably not answer it live. So I gave you my email address earlier if you need to email me some other QuickBooks related questions. In order for you to kind of test this on your own, you can go to the link on the page here, qbo.intuit.com/redir/test drive. If you go to that link, it will take you to a test file and you can kind of play with QuickBooks at any time during the webinar or in the future without having to work with any actual live file. Or you can click on the gear menu and click on Sample Company to open a sample file from your QuickBooks Online accountant screen. Now we're going to have some handouts. Make sure to check out the handouts that are on the handout section. We're going to have a new client checklist that we're going to talk about, which is a great tool to get your clients set up. So let's talk about selecting the right version or the right subscription of QuickBooks Online for your client. So for a very long time, QuickBooks Online was comprised of 3 essential versions: QuickBooks Online Simple Start, QuickBooks Online Essentials, and QuickBooks Online Plus. As of the date of this recording, the price of these is $20, $35, and $60 a month. These are the core QuickBooks Online products. To the left, you can see this box, the shaded box. QuickBooks Online Self-Employed is actually a similar system, but it's not part of the QuickBooks Online ecosystem because QuickBooks Online is an accounting program with a balance sheet and is meant for it to be used like an accounting system. Whereas QuickBooks Self-Employed is really for those folks that don't want the balance sheet and mixing personal with business, right? In the QuickBooks world, so Simple Start all the way to Advanced, it is assumed that it's all 100% business. Now to the right, we don't have a box shot for QuickBooks Online Advanced because it's a brand new SKU. And basically think of QuickBooks Online Advanced as the highest tier. That's going to be for the larger companies that have between 6 and 25 users that will have more comprehensive needs in terms of importing invoices and some other advanced tools that they're adding. We'll cover that briefly. But the Simple Start, Essentials, and Plus are the core versions that we've seen, at least for the past couple of years, that QuickBooks has really marketed these three versions strongly. So on this lesson, we'll talk about how to use the needs assessment sheet to be able to select the right version or suggest the right version for your client. Then either whether you're going to pay for it via the wholesale discount, which we'll discuss, or your client will pay for it, set up that new account, and whether or not you need to also suggest a third-party app. So a couple of things, when your clients come to you and say, I need to move to QuickBooks Online, this could be an excellent opportunity to discuss what they do now. In some cases, you may have a customer that doesn't have QuickBooks Desktop or has some other accounting system, and what they're trying to move from QuickBooks Online from maybe a paper system or another accounting system. That would be a slightly different conversation because they're not going from QuickBooks brand to a QuickBooks brand. Just a different conversation. So the first thing is discuss the current process. Ask questions like, how do bills get paid? How do invoices get entered? How do checks get approved? That sort of thing, right? So you want to ask about their current process. Second is you want to talk to every single person that touches QuickBooks, that will touch QuickBooks, because sometimes the owner or the manager or whoever you're speaking to may not have all the answers because they're not the ones using QuickBooks day to day. So you may strongly consider speaking to everyone. Now use Test Drive, right? So go to Google and type QuickBooks Online Test Drive and play with it, even in front of your client, to show them what would that look like if that was QuickBooks Online. Make sure you address any differences between QuickBooks Online or desktop at that point, especially for folks coming from desktop, because they have a certain expectation of how things would work. And then lastly, compare the subscriptions and find the best fit. So in the needs assessment, and we're going to show you the worksheet, we're going to get some initial company info. Then we're going to ask about, what does the computer system look like? What does the document management system look like? What computers are you using? Do you have high-speed internet access? Tell me about your IT infrastructure. Then you want to find out their needs on the sales side, right? On estimates, on invoicing, on receiving payments. Then their needs on the purchase side, creating purchase orders, creating bills, managing accounts payable. Then you want to find out three key elements. One is, are you managing inventory, right? And if the answer is yes, we want to assess how complex that inventory is. Is there manufacturing? Are there some advanced inventory needs that maybe QuickBooks Online can't handle? You may want to find that out right away, like barcode scanning, that sort of thing is not built into QuickBooks Online, so you may need an additional app. Job costing, right? There are some restrictions to what QuickBooks Online can do with job costing, so you may want to get in depth in terms of what is your expectation in terms of job costing, and scheduling, right? Do you schedule your jobs? Do you schedule your employees? Do you schedule invoices? Do you memorize, automate invoices? That sort of stuff. Then you want to ask about payroll, right? How many employees? Are you paying a third-party company for payroll? Do you want to manage it internally? Do you want to use a third party? Then you want to ask about reporting. So give me an idea more or less of what reports you use day to day to run your business in whatever other system they have, and what reports would you like to have to run your business better. Then you want to ask about sales tax and income tax. How do you do your income tax planning. So those are the 8 components of basic needs assessment. Okay. So when we talk about specifically the sales process, right? If the customer has a e-commerce business, you know they're not going to be creating invoices. You know the invoices are going to be coming from the e-commerce system. So you may want to find out what e-commerce system they have and whether or not it integrates with QuickBooks, and maybe do a couple of tests, like see how those sales receipts come in, right? We want to know that. Are sales receipts coming in automatically? Because that will change your workflow in terms of bank reconciliations. If they have a retail company and they have a point of sale system, you may want to also know how those sales are entered in the POS system, and then figure out whether or not the POS system talks to QuickBooks Online, or whether you have to train them on how to enter the daily sales receipts. Do they do progress invoicing? So do they have projects and they're going to need to invoice as a percentage of the original estimate? Do they need to use price levels? So do they have items that cost different prices depending on the context, right? So certain customers get a special wholesale discount. Some customers pay retail. You may want to know that. So that's on the sales side. Now on the cost side, or on the payable side, we want to know, do you enter bills in QuickBooks before they're paid? Do you need to print a report of everything you owe and somebody else to approve it? Do you need to go through an approval process to pay these bills? And if you want to automate the approval process, or have a cloud-based approval process, you may need an app like Bill.com. Job costing, how in depth do you go in terms of allocating expenses to the customers or jobs? You want to ask that. You want to understand that. How do you manage expense reports and reimbursables? Also, to determine whether or not it will be wise to recommend a third-party app like Expensify to manage expense reports. Now, on the inventory side, we want to find out, do you have inventory, right? Do you have manufacturing and do assemblies? Because QuickBooks Online, as of the date of this webinar, doesn't do inventory assemblies. It's important to know. Do you manage average cost or FIFO? That question, at the end of the day, most customers say, I don't know. And if they need FIFO, QuickBooks Online by default does FIFO, so that's good. Do you manage inventory in multiple locations? Unfortunately, QuickBooks Online doesn't manage inventory by location, just a single location. So you couldn't run a report of inventory by location in QuickBooks Online. You may need a third-party app for that. Do you need, or do you expect to be able to scan your inventory, scan it in, scan it out, that sort of thing? You want to know that, because QuickBooks Online doesn't do that natively. You may need a third-party app to do that. Okay. Now, on the payroll side, some of the common questions to ask is, how do you do your time tracking? So are people punching in a time clock that's stuck to a wall somewhere in the office? Do they do it through a phone? Do they do it by hand? Do they fax that somewhere? Does someone send timesheets to their accountant or to their payroll processing company? You want to ask about that and figure out how they want to do it. QuickBooks Online will have a time tracking system, and you can set up anybody to log in and put in their time. If you want to use something like a phone to time track, and you want to GPS geolocate that time stamp, that sort of thing, you may want to use a third-party app like T-Sheets. Do they do multiple states? Multiple state payrolls, complicated. Most end users don't really do a really good job. Really good job with that. So you may want to use maybe full service payroll through QuickBooks Online to manage the multiple state. Do they manage commissions, or how do they manage commissions now, right? So QuickBooks Online doesn't have a built-in commissions report, but you may want to know how they track their sales and what they base their commissions off, because you may need to build some custom reports in QuickBooks that will give them the information about commissions. Benefits management, right? Do they have a 401k? Do they have health insurance? Do you pay for workers' comp? You want to know what that looks like so you can plan for it. Now, when it comes to reporting, you want to know what are the essential reports that people need to run their business, right? Beyond the essentials, beyond profit and loss balance sheet and that sort of thing. So do they need any custom reports? Ask for those reports that they have now. So you can do some tests to make sure that QuickBooks Online can do that or can achieve getting access to that information. Do they have industry specific reports that they need? You may have to build them manually in QuickBooks Online. Do they want to see reports on their phone, right? So they're going to need the iPhone app or the smartphone app to be able to run reports. The app itself can do basic reports. It can do custom reports. So that you want to automate and email those reports through QuickBooks Online. Those are really good things to ask. And then on the compliance side, you want to find out, do you do sales tax? Do you have multiple states that you have nexus in? Do you have to manage sales tax in multiple states? And how do you do your tax planning, right? So how do you plan for your estimated payments as a business owner, that sort of thing. So I'm going to open up the checklist that's on the handout section. Okay, so I alluded to the checklist. So let me open that up real quick and share that with you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my Excel. Okay, so working on getting the full screen here. Okay, so this checklist is really good to have. Let me zoom this in even a little bit more. So let me zoom this into 200%. So you can have all the basic company information here, name, address, email, number of users, current software is a great place to put the initial information. Then you want to go down this list, right? And you want to put a check mark next to it saying, yes, we need that. Yes, we need this. So you're just going to go down the list and mark these, right? So yes, I need this. Yes, I need this, right? So as you go through your needs assessment, you're going to go through all of these things. And as you go through all these things and you get to the point where you know exactly what they need, you're going to realize, how many of the features are on the plus version or on the advanced version or on the essentials version or on the simple start version. So you can compare it to the previous versions and then make a decision, which version are you going to recommend, whether simple start, essentials, plus, or advanced. Okay, so this checklist is really good to have. It forces you to go down the list and ask for these things. Do you need this? Do you need this? How do you do this? So it's a great prompt to have and a great place to add it in there. And then when you talk about maybe some of the potential add-ons or potential apps we can add, do we want to have online bill payment or an expense approval system? Do we want to have expense reports? Do we want to be able to do sales orders, inventory assembly of or units of measure like advanced inventory, where we need a third-party app? Do we want to use GPS phone-based time tracking, where you can recommend things like T-sheets, and then some place for additional notes. There's some other stuff here in the bottom for self-employed individuals, folks that don't have a business per se, and they kind of mix personal with business. But you can also add additional information there, whether they use self-employed or not. So great checklist to have. That's on the handouts section. So you can just click on that and download that, and that's part of today's webinar. That's included content. So let me share the screen again. Get back to the PowerPoint presentation. And hopefully that answered your question about the checklist. Okay. All right. So is your client a good fit for QuickBooks Online? So these are the things that you want to consider. One, they want to be able to use a smartphone, right? So the smartphone app allows you to invoice from the smartphone, allows you to look at certain expenses, allows you to classify expenses, allows you to take pictures of receipts so you can attach them to your expenses in QuickBooks. QuickBooks Online does that really, really well. QuickBooks Desktop or other applications, I'm not sure how well they do that. The customer is comfortable with working online. So if you have a client that's just very skeptical about doing things in the cloud or even using online banking, they're probably going to be so nervous anyway that they may not be a really good fit. So I would strongly recommend that just concentrate on the clients that that embrace the cloud. Now, if they have one or more locations where they don't want to be physically tied down to one physical office that has all the computers networked together so they can use some sort of desktop platform, QuickBooks Online is great for mobile users because anyone that has a computer or a phone with internet can access QuickBooks. They're looking for some automation on the bank side, especially on bank feeds. I have a really good video in my YouTube channel, which is just type Hector Garcia bank feeds. And it's like a 40-minute video that explains how data automation works with the bank. Just really, really, once you understand that, you're going to be sold on QuickBooks Online because it's pretty much about the best feature that it has. And now it's important to use that, to know that QuickBooks Online, it's pretty much one of the easiest software packages out there for cloud accounting. And most businesses can use it. Like they really can. Only the really large businesses that have very sort of high-end needs, they may need to use something else that's not QuickBooks Online, or there are apps that you can add to QuickBooks Online to expand its capability. Now, in terms of the actual needs assessment, you want to find out what does a client struggle with, right? So what's your day-to-day struggle? Like in some cases, they will tell you, I struggle to upload receipts, or I struggle to manage accounts payable, or I struggle to categorize expenses, or I struggle to invoice every month the same thing to every client. So you may want to know what the struggles are and see what opportunities there are on the QuickBooks side. Most people are mostly what they struggle with is the amount of work, right? Too much work, too much data entry. Hopefully through bank feeds and downloading the transactions, you can automate some of that stuff. There's also a lot of specific issues which are called engagement bottlenecks. This is where an accountant has to wait for the client to finish working so they can save a backup of the file and they can email it over, or you can arrange to log in remotely to log into their desktop software and then wait for those documentations, make the changes on your side, send it back to your clients. QuickBooks Online really alleviates a lot of that. So you want to know what is it about the old accountant or even the current accountant if it's an existing client. Where was the bottleneck? Where did you spend too much time waiting for the next person to do the next thing? Now, if a client has a remote workforce and they want to have real-time multi-user access where people are not waiting for one person to log out so the next person can log in, QuickBooks Online is a great tool for that. And if the client tends to lose receipts and documentation, with a phone app, you can take pictures of that stuff and upload it to QuickBooks Online right away. So this is the client checklist that we alluded to a little bit earlier. You can download that. That's an Excel format. I've seen a lot of accountants and pro advisors modify it. So they get this one and then they add their logo. They add some additional questions. That's totally fine, right? This is just a basic template with the basic stuff. But I've seen a lot of accountants, even from my practice, I added a lot of fields that I personally like to ask to my new clients during the checklist. So I modify that for my own use. So that being said, with everything we talked about, let's discuss real quick in the fastest possible way, what version do you usually recommend to your client based on their needs? So QuickBooks Self-Employed only for clients that don't have a business that files a separate tax return. So if they file Schedule C because they're not incorporated or because they're a single member LLC, QuickBooks Online Self-Employed tends to be the best choice. It does sync the banking. It does create invoicing, right? It does have an accountant user, but it's not meant for multi-user. It's not meant for balance sheet. And it does allow you to put both personal and business expenses in one place. And it will show you personal and business expenses in one report because it's not a separate corporation, right? The IRS doesn't require separating personal and business, right? So because of that, because of that, the the QuickBooks doesn't have a balance sheet, so require you to separate the two. But if you have a multi-member LLC, or you have an S corporation, or you have a C corporation, and you need to do a balance sheet, and you need to separate the personal with the business and have it be 100% business, then you want to be looking at the QuickBooks Online family that's not self-employed. So Simple Start allows you to track invoices, income and expenses, banking, and electronic payments like credit card payments and payroll, right? But it's not meant for multi-user. So it's just for one user. Simple Start, one user, invoices, expenses, banking, payroll, and payments. That's okay. If you need multi-users, up to 3 users, you go to QuickBooks Essentials. Once you go to QuickBooks Essentials, it adds a couple of extra features. One, time tracking users. So if you have payroll, multiple users tracking their time, that's in there. It can do multiple currencies. It can manage bills, accounts payable. It can manage bills. It can also do delayed charges, which I don't have time to get too much into, but that's for you to record items of an invoice through the month. And then at the end of the month, press one button and it invoices all those items or services in one shot. And it can do recurring transactions. So you can create an invoice that gets created every month for the same amount and automatically emailed to your customers with access to sending customers reminders of that as well. So that's Essentials. Now, you go to Plus generally when you need to do purchase orders, inventory, budgets, manage vendors in which you're going to do 1099s. You need to have multiple classes or locations, and you want up to 5 users working with QuickBooks Online. So if any of those conditions apply, then you're going to go with Plus. Now, if you have a Plus candidate that also needs to have unlimited locations and classes, that needs to build custom users with custom access permission, you want to have up to 25 users working in QuickBooks Online at the same time. You want to be able to do importing of invoices and batch invoicing and a little bit of premium support. Then you go with QuickBooks Online Advanced. Okay. Now, in the checklist, in the Excel's checklist, you're going to notice that there's a second tab in the bottom. So I'll open that as well. In the second tab, we have additional information specifically about the features. So if you open up that same spreadsheet, which I'm going to do it now, and let me share the screen on that spreadsheet. You should be able to see my Excel now. If I go to the tab in the bottom that says subscriptions, and I'm going to zoom this out, make this 200%, you have every version and all the feature set for each. Every version and all the feature set, and every version and the entire feature set. So, and including the self-employed and the advanced. So it's a good sort of cheat sheet to have. So once you know what your customer needs, you know exactly what you're gonna recommend. So what are these apps that we're talking about? So if you go to apps.com, you can actually search for any specific functionality and see the options that there are in terms of additional integrated apps that you can use. So let me share my browser so I can show you what that looks like. So when you go to, this is apps.com. So I went to apps.com, and then I'm going to search in apps.com for a specific functionality, like let's call it GPS time tracking. Okay. So I'm going to put a GPS time tracking, and it will give you all the apps that do GPS time tracking, including T-Sheets, which is really the one that most people are known for. For some reason, it doesn't come up on the search, but this is one that most are known for. This allows you to have users with their smartphones clock in and out and a GPS tag where they were, right? So you know exactly what customers they're working on and that sort of thing. But if you want to do, let's say, barcodes, right? You're looking for apps that do barcode. You search barcode and it'll give you all the apps that fall into that category. So this app here called Locate Inventory is really good for barcode scanning. All Orders is really good for barcode scanning. There's another one that didn't show up in the search called Dear Inventory, also really good for barcodes, in inventory. So that's how apps.com works. You just look for the app. Usually, most of these apps are more expensive than QuickBooks Online. So it's not a couple of bucks. Some of these apps are $100, $200, $300 a month, but these apps are specialized and they work for specific industries, and they're there to reduce data entry in such a way that a lot of these companies are basically cutting off an entire employee that used to do all these things by hand. Now apps are able to do that. So within the context of the time that you save and the efficiencies that you get, the apps could actually save you money over time. Okay, so that's the story with apps. So let's move on to the process of setting up a new company. So typically you're gonna have three separate scenarios in which you're gonna be dealing with your QuickBooks Online client. Scenario one, your client is a brand new business or they don't have an accounting system and you are setting everything up from zero. Scenario number two, they have an accounting system of some sort and it's not the QuickBooks branded system. So it's a spreadsheet or some other software that they're doing accounting with, and they're asking you to do some sort of conversion or implementation, bringing some of that data over. And scenario number three, they're going to be on QuickBooks Desktop, and you may decide to do a conversion from desktop to online. Note, I have many clients that have QuickBooks Desktop and we decide not to convert, to start from scratch, because QuickBooks Desktop is already a mess. So why start with garbage, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So if you decide to, because the QuickBooks Desktop is a good data file, if you decide to bring that over, that's scenario number three. So we're going to discuss what that looks like. So I'm going to show you through the screens here. If you are an accountant and you have a QuickBooks Online accountant login, and I hope that everybody on this call has that. If you don't have that, just go to proadvisor.intuit.com and follow the prompts. You get a free account as an accountant, and your screen will look like this. You have a big green bar in the top that's letting you know you're an accountant. And then you can add your clients by clicking on the Add Client button on the top right. Now, once you click on Add Client, you're going to pick if the client is a business or an individual. You're going to add their information, and it's going to ask you a few key questions. One is the customer going to pay for QuickBooks on their own? You're going to pick that option that says direct discount, client is billed. You will give your client a discount for 3 months to a year, depending on the current promotion, if you click on direct discount or client is billed. You can also pick wholesale discount, which means you will permanently, as the firm that created a QuickBooks Online account from scratch, get a 50% discount on QuickBooks Online Essentials or Plus and a 30% discount on QuickBooks Online Advanced. There's no discounts for self-employed, I believe, and no discounts for Simple Start unless that changed somehow. And also you can add a client without a subscription, which is basically just a client on the client list and they will not be using QuickBooks Online. But if you're setting them up as a wholesale client, you're going to be between Essentials Plus and Advanced for the most part. So think Essentials Plus 50%, Advanced 30%. And you will pay for it. As the accountant, you will pay for it. So you either will choose to resell that to your customer or to build it into your accounting, consulting fees, like tax preparation fees, whatever it happens to be. So on the wholesale side, there's a link to that on the slides if you want to see how that works. But automatically, as an accountant, you will have access to wholesale billing. So once you add the client, and you add the client so they pay their own subscription, you're going to have in the bottom an option that says Team Access. So if you have multiple employees working inside QuickBooks Online, you can pick which of your employees is going to have access to that specific customer. Okay, so as the firm owner or firm manager, you will be the one creating the client's file, but you'll also be choosing which of your team members will have access to that customer as well. Once you add multiple customers into your QuickBooks Online dashboard, you're going to see the list of all your customers. And if you see that little gray QuickBooks logo next to it, that means that that customer has a QuickBooks Online account created. Now, it doesn't mean it's active or inactive. It just means it was created, right? So once you click on that, you'll be able to access the account as long as they have an active account that's being paid for and it's hasn't been canceled or anything. You can log into the books on that. But these are only customers that have either granted you access as their accountant and you've accepted it, or customers that you added to your list as wholesale because you're paying for them. So they're going to be mixed in there. And in the filter, you can filter the ones that the customers pay on their own and the ones that you pay for them. You can actually filter them out in this list. Now, once we create the new company and we're done doing the initial setup and we pick who pays for it and all that stuff, it's going to ask you for the company name. It's going to ask you how long you've been in business for. That's really not that relevant. That question doesn't make much of a difference. And then it will ask you whether or not you're bringing the data from QuickBooks Desktop. Because if you bring in the data from QuickBooks Desktop, you're not going to be doing any additional setup until you bring the data in. Because the additional setup happens after the data comes in, right? If you're not bringing it from QuickBooks Desktop, then you're going to do the setup right away. So it's going to ask you a couple questions, and then it's going to take you straight into the dashboard. No transactions, all zero, ready to start from scratch. Now, let's do a quick pause to talk about what the process looks like if you come from QuickBooks Desktop. So if you're coming from QuickBooks Desktop, you have to first go to the gear menu and you're going to click on Import Desktop Data. By the way, this is a one-time thing. You can't import to desktop every month or every week. You cannot simultaneously use QuickBooks Online and use QuickBooks Desktop. It doesn't work like that. This is a one-time conversion to bring all the data over. Once you click on Import Desktop Data, it will give you specific instructions. If you follow the instructions on the screen, open QuickBooks Desktop or download a free trial if you don't have one, or if you happen to only use QuickBooks Online and your client gave you a copy of the desktop file and they're asking you to do the conversion for them, you may have to download a free trial. Open it up, follow the instructions, and do the export process. Now, prior to exporting, you have to make sure that the file has been verified and rebuilt if there's any errors. You also need to make sure that you press F2 and you make sure that the file is physically in your computer or physically in the computer that you're doing the conversion from. So it can't be in a server. So you have to bring it over to the physical computer you're doing the conversion from, copy it in your computer, and open it from there because it's going to be giving you errors if it's sitting on a server. We're going to do a latest update to QuickBooks Desktop. Make sure it's in the latest version. Verify, run a data rebuild, and then do a backup. You have to log in as an admin to do the conversion. And the last restriction here, once you go through all that, is the total targets. The total targets in your QuickBooks Desktop file cannot exceed 350,000. If it gets to 350,000 or more, the conversion tool will not work. So you have to, within QuickBooks Desktop, you're going to have to reduce the file size or cannot convert. Okay? Cannot convert means you can still go to QuickBooks Online and you can import your customers, your vendors, your items, but you cannot bring transaction data. This process of bringing historical transaction data restricts it to 350,000 targets. So the targets is a total number of lines on transactions in all of your entire QuickBooks. So unless you do a data condense and get below the 350,000, you're not going to be able to do the conversion. So really important stuff to know. And this is the place where you can physically know if the file is sitting in your computer. So it needs to be on a C drive or a D drive or something like that. It needs to be in your computer, not on a server. And if your QuickBooks Desktop is not updated, just go to the Help menu, update QuickBooks, and you must be on the most recent version for this to work. These are the steps to do a data verify and a data rebuild. You're going to do a data verify first. If it finishes the verify and says no errors, you can move forward. If it says there's an error, you're going to have to back up and do a rebuild. So all the slides take you to that process. Once that's done, then you're going to go to the company menu. You're going to click on Export Company File to QuickBooks Online. This happened after you created the account in the QuickBooks Online side. So you're going to use your username and password to log in. And then you're going to have a drop down of all the companies that are sitting there in your list of clients. You're going to pick the right client that matches that company file. You click on Continue. Takes about an hour or two, depending on the size of the data. I've seen some of these take 4 hours, but if it's a relatively small file, sometimes it's even less than an hour. You get an email confirmation letting you know you're good to go. Now you can work on QuickBooks Online. Normally, you don't want to do anything. You don't want to do a setup. You don't want to touch a chart of accounts. You don't want to mess with it while the conversion from desktop is happening. At the end, you will get an import summary letting you know what converted over, if there's any differences between any balance sheet accounts or profit and loss accounts. And this summary just kind of lets you know whether or not the conversion came complete or you lost some stuff in the process. In my experience, you will always lose something in the process. So 99% of times you lose something. Now that something is minimal. Sometimes an invoice, a payment to an invoice, an adjustment to an invoice, a discount to an invoice. Those things you lose just because during the data conversion process, it loses something in the process. And there's also features that QuickBooks Online doesn't have compared to desktop. So if you have a sales orders don't come over. QuickBooks Online doesn't have sales orders. So some things you lose because of features and some things are just having to do with a conversion. So after that, what you normally want to do is run a balance sheet and a profit and loss with all dates. And in accrual, it must be accrual. So you can't compare them in cash basis because QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online have different methods and algorithms to calculate cash basis. They only have similar algorithms for accrual basis. So you want to run the reports in accrual to compare. Whether or not you file taxes as cash basis, that would be irrelevant. You just need to compare the two. And then if you see differences, you have to determine if the differences are material enough that it matters or it doesn't matter, or you can make journal entries to just make the accounts match. Okay. So once we create the file from scratch, because the client doesn't have any accounting system, or we created the account from scratch because the client has some other accounting system, or you convert it to QuickBooks Desktop, we're going to talk about what the next steps look like. So I'm going to sprinkle some of the kind of the internal know-how in the variances of dealing with it based on the scenario. So first step is we're going to click on the gear menu and we're going to click on account and settings. We're going to go through all the settings completely, right? We're going to change the company name, add the logo, put the tax ID, select the tax form, the industry, the company name, the company email, the customer facing email, which is the email they'll see on an invoice that you email or something like that. Their phone number, website address, all that information is going to be entered on this screen. We're going to click on the little pencil button to edit it. Billing and subscription, just to confirm what version of QuickBooks you have signed up for, if there's a free trial, that sort of thing. If you have added payroll, that's going to show up in there. If you added payments, that will show up in there that you have a payments subscription. So a payment subscription means that people can get paid via credit card. Okay, they can pay via credit card when they invoice. You also want to go through the settings, account and settings for sales, and you want to customize the invoice. You want to turn off and on features you want to see on your invoices and estimates. You want to turn off and on features related to maybe inventory. This is the place where you go turn on and off inventory. Change the templates that are going to be for your reminders, or your default text that shows up in an invoice, that sort of thing. Now, the most common thing that we do is we customize the invoice. So we click on customize look and feel, and that's the place we go. And then we can build multiple templates. We're not going to get into the mechanics of that, but you can have multiple templates with different logos, different colors, different fields, and depending on what you're selling and the context in which you're selling, you may want to use different invoices. Now, there's also the expenses tab on the account and settings, where you can turn off and on job costing. You can turn off and on making items billable, turn off and on purchase orders, that sort of thing. Now, if you click on payments and you click on learn more and you follow the process to apply, then you can enable a Visa, MasterCard, American Express logo on the invoices. So when the invoice gets sent to the customers, they can click on pay now, and it will take them to the process where they can pay with a credit card or with a direct bank ACH. And QuickBooks has a service built in for their users, so they can collect payments electronically. There's also the advanced tab where you can change things like the fiscal year, the accounting method, turn off and on classes and locations, some settings about automatically applying credits, turning off and on projects. All that stuff is going to be in the advanced tab. And also keep in mind that depending on the version of QuickBooks that you have, you may or may not have those settings available. Okay, you could also change multi-currency and date formats and number formats and all that stuff. Okay. And let's go to the next slide. So, number of users, we touched on this briefly before. So if you're using Simple Start or self-employed, they're only going to have one user. One person using QuickBooks Online, typically the one owner of the business will do everything, right? Then we have Essentials, which allows up to 3 users. You can have a company administrator and a custom user that has some basic restrictions. And you can have unlimited time tracking users. So if you have payroll turned on in Essentials, you can have multiple people log in and enter the timesheets. Now, if you go to Plus, you're going to have up to 5 users. And you also can create unlimited report-only users. So if you have one user that all they do is look at reports, that's not going to count towards your 5 users. And then on the advanced queue, you're going to have up to 25 users, and you can also have additional level of customization for the custom users, and the same unlimited time tracking users and unlimited report only users. The accountant that logs into QuickBooks as an accountant doesn't count as a user. It's basically one of the accountant users, and you can have up to 2 accounting firm users. So when you click on the gear menu and you click on manage users, and you have 2 tabs. You have a users tab and then an accountants tab. When you click on the accountants tab, you can select and invite an accountant. When you're in the users tab, you can see a list of all the users that are there, and then you can click on add user to create a new user. You're going to have a custom user, which allows you to pick what they have access to, a company admin that can do everything basically, then the reports only user or the time tracking only user. Now, when you create a custom user, you're going to have some limited options in terms of what you can limit them. So the basic custom user in Essentials and Plus basically allows you to give them access to all vendor transactions or all customer transactions. And that's it. If you give them all access, they can have access to the banking and the payroll. Now, once your user is created, you're going to put the username, the email, their name and last name, and they're going to get an email and they set up their own password. So you're not creating the passwords for any of the end users. You're just inviting them, and then they're coming back and they're creating those passwords on their own. Once they create the password, they'll be able to log in and they can look at and work with QuickBooks Online. So the next step is to configure the chart of accounts. So if you have QuickBooks Online set up from scratch and you don't convert from desktop, you're going to have a very small basic chart of accounts. So you want to click on the accounting tab on the left-hand side. You can search within the current accounts that are there. You can run a report for any specific account if you need to, or you can create new accounts. To create a new account, you're going to click on the new button on the top right. Then you're going to select the account type. The account type is really important. It will give you choices between income, expenses, cost of goods sold, other income, other expenses, bank, other current asset, accounts receivable, fixed asset, other asset, accounts payable, credit card, long-term liability, current liability, and equity. Those are going to be the different account types that you can choose. And the account type determines in what report they go to, right? Do they go to the P&L? Do they go to the balance sheet? Now, the detail type is just there to sort of help the user pick the right account. But the detail type bears no weight on the financial statements, on the reports. So the detail type could be wrong if you pick the wrong one, and it's not really a big deal. But the detail type is really there to help the user pick, to make sure that they are on the right track, or they feel they're on the right track. For the most part, people tend to be more confused about that detail type, but that's there nonetheless. Then after we create our chart of accounts and we bring all the information from the chart of accounts, we want to then configure our items, or in the QuickBooks Desktop world, they used to be called items. In the QuickBooks Online world, they're called products and services. So we're going to go into sales and click on products and services, and you can click on new to create a new item. And there's different types of items. It's going to ask you whether it's an inventory item, non-inventory item, a service, or a bundle. So the inventory items are only available in Plus and Advance. And inventory is only used when you buy something today that you put in a warehouse somewhere and track the quantities, and they're going to be sold in the future. If you don't store the inventory and you don't track the quantities in stock, but it's still a part, then I would pick non-inventory. Okay. Inventory requires a lot more maintenance because you have to make sure that your inventory is adjusted, that sort of thing. But you only use inventory if you really know that you want to track inventory in QuickBooks. Now, service is very similar to non-inventory. The way it works is the exact same way. It just allows you to distinct between a product or a service. And then a bundle would be if you want to add multiple items, whether they're inventory, non-inventory, or service, as a group, and you want to sell them all together in one shot, and you want to save the time to enter 4 items in one shot, for example, you can just select a bundle and they auto-populate everything that's within the bundle. Inventory, again, only available in Plus and Advance. Bundle, only available in Essentials. And service and non-inventory are available across all versions. Bundles in Essentials and Plus and Advance. Sorry. So bundles is both Essentials, Plus, and Advance. So when you create the item, it's going to ask you for the item name. It's going to ask you if the item is being sold to customers, and if that item is going to show up on an invoice. You have to check that box. It's also going to ask you if the item is being purchased. It's as you scroll down, is being purchased or being purchased from a vendor. So if you want that item to show up in a bill or in a purchase order, you have to hit that checkbox. You have to give it a name and an account, right? So the account that it points to. You don't have to give it a price. You don't have to give it a description. That's optional. And you don't have to give it a category. That's optional too. So a category would be, in the QuickBooks Desktop world, they used to call it items and sub-items. But the categories allow you to group the items in a logical fashion. So if you want to run a report of all the items within a specific category, you can do that. Okay. After you create the accounts and the products, the next thing you want to do is create your customers. So you can click on the customers tab inside sales, click on add new, And then you can add all the customer information, name, address, phone number, all that stuff. You can add it from this screen. Then you want to add your vendors. These are your suppliers. These are the entities you pay for products and services as expenses to your business. So you're going to create the vendors. And by the way, everybody that's not a customer or an employee by default is a vendor. So that's the people get confused. Like, where do I put the IRS? Well, the IRS would be a vendor. Or where do I put the Department of Revenue of my local state? That would be a vendor. Where do I put a subcontractor? Well, that's technically a vendor and a subcontractor. QuickBooks has a database for both, right? So vendors and subcontractors, but it's still under the vendor realm. Okay. Then let's assume that we didn't convert from QuickBooks Desktop and we don't want to enter these things by hand. We have everything in Excel. So we have a spreadsheet with all my customer names and addresses. We have a spreadsheet with all my items. We have a spreadsheet with all my vendors. I have a spreadsheet with all my chart of accounts. So QuickBooks Online, all the versions, Simple Start, Essentials, Plus, and Advanced, allow you to import those four: customers, vendors, products and services, and chart of accounts. QuickBooks Online Advanced allows you to import invoices as well if they are in Excel, but only the advanced one can import invoices. Anyway, when we click on import data, it's going to ask me for, okay, which one do you want to import? Is it customers? Is it vendors? Is it items or chart of accounts? You can download the sample file. I strongly recommend you download the sample file and you pre-fill the information in the sample file. And you're going to click on browse and map it. Now I want to show you what the sample file looks like. I find that to be really valuable. So let me open up the sample file, go into QuickBooks Online here for a second to show you. So I'm going to go to a sample file and show you that. Okay, I'm going to go into the gear menu, click on import data. I'm going to import let's say my customers, and click on download sample file and open that up. Okay, and let me show you what that screen looks like. So you should be seeing the spreadsheet. So the sample file kind of basically shows you this is where the customer name goes in, this is where the company name comes in, the customer type, because you can group customers by type, the email, phone number, website, address, all that information can be loaded from here. You cannot import beginning balances. QuickBooks doesn't let you do that. Actually, I take it back. You cannot import beginning balances if you import it from QuickBooks Desktop. So if you came from QuickBooks Desktop, you cannot import beginning balances. But if you're starting from scratch and you have your list in Excel, then you can actually enter the beginning balances here and enter the date of that beginning balance. That's typically going to be the cutoff date, 12/31/2018, whatever it happens to be. You're going to update that and then you can import it. So if the customer is brand new in QuickBooks and you didn't bring it from QuickBooks Desktop, then you can bring them in and import those beginning balances. So I wanted to show you what that looked like. So you have an idea for how to what the process is for importing. I strongly recommend that you download those sample files and adjust your current database or your current Excel to fit the sample file, because it's going to make your life much easier, especially because you have to do mapping. So mapping means that you have to select which column of your spreadsheet matches the data field inside QuickBooks. If you use the sample file, all the mapping happens pretty much automatically. And then this is what the next screen looks like when you import it. And if you're missing any information or whatever it happens to be, you can change it there, you can adjust it. And then once you fix it, you're going to click on import. And that would be importing custom. The next step is during the setup is to connect the banks. So you're going to click on the banking tab, and then you're going to select all the banks, and you're going to log in using the username and password of each bank account, banks and credit cards. You're going to log into QuickBooks, and you're going to follow the prompts. So they all get connected and they all get mapped to an account in your chart of accounts. QuickBooks automatically, as of the date of this webinar, for most users, is going to import 90 days worth of transactions. So if you want less, you just have to delete it. If you want more, you may not be able to use the direct connection feature, and you're going to have to go into the bank and download the data in a QBO file or an Excel file, a CSV file, to import into QuickBooks manually. You may want to check out YouTube. There's a couple of videos that I did where I explained that process. But on the normal circumstances, you would bring in the last 90 days worth, and then you would delete whatever you want to delete, and maybe just do, the last month or the last 2 months, depending on how much catch-up work you're going to be doing inside QuickBooks Online. For example, if you're in the middle of March and you're bringing in QuickBooks Online in the middle of March, you're probably going to want to bring in only 2019, which will work with 90 days, and then enter adjusting balances for 2018. If you're starting QuickBooks, let's say in the beginning of March, at the beginning of April, to do taxes, right, for 2018, you may want to not use the import feature, the direct import feature. Go to the bank directly and manually download a whole year's worth of transactions, so you can do the accounting for that via bank feeds. So that matters a lot. The workflow matters a lot. Then after you have imported the bank accounts, you can create the rules, and you can also search YouTube for a detailed video that I have on bank rules. And you want to create a rule where you want to tell QuickBooks, if the vendor is Shell, make that go straight into the vendor Shell and the category gas or automobile. If the vendor is Xfinity or Comcast, make that go to utilities. If the vendor is the name of my landlord, whatever it happens to be, then that needs to go to rent. So you can create these rules, so when the bank feed gets downloaded, it automatically gets categorized to vendors that are already in your database and to accounts that are already in your chart of accounts. So this will really speed up your data entry. Again, I would recommend that you look into that YouTube video. It's about 38 minutes long, called QuickBooks Bank Feeds. It kind of explains this process. Stephen is asking, do you ever migrate a client from QuickBooks Online to desktop? It has happened. It's not very common. Once we go to online, it's a pretty permanent commitment. Honestly, it's hard. Change is hard regardless. So if you got a customer that's been using QuickBooks Desktop for 15 years, going to QuickBooks Online is hard because it's change. And once they go to QuickBooks Online and they adapt, typically people don't want to go back, because QuickBooks Online is so easy. It's so user-friendly. It's so drama-free when it comes to technology and computers freezing and networks. So very rarely we move people to desktop. But if they have heavy job costing, custom reports, inventory tracking, I move them to desktop because I like to keep them in the QuickBooks ecosystem. And there are cases in which it makes sense. But the problem with the conversion is, regardless whether you go to desktop to online or online down to desktop, there's always something that could potentially get lost. So I always worry about that. All right. So, the follow-up question is, what if it's a non-QuickBooks Online client that wants to go to desktop? Yeah, sure. If I have a client that wants to go with QuickBooks Desktop, unless they don't, unless they specifically have reservations with online, or they have a specific feature set that QuickBooks Online is not a good fit for them, then yes, I put them on desktop. I'm actually a desktop and online pro advisor. I play with both. But I recommend that if you're getting started, if you are a brand new accountant, brand new bookkeeper, or new to the QuickBooks ecosystem, and you never really used or worked with desktop before, or don't have any specific reasons why you personally like desktop more than online, I recommend that you don't bother with desktop technology in general. This is not a QuickBooks thing. This is just technology in general. you're gonna be much more free working with online technology. You're gonna be unfettered. You're not gonna be dealing with desktop platforms or dealing with desktop drama. Your clients are gonna be happier. Your clients are gonna ask for cloud technology anyway. That's what people are asking for. So at the end of the day, which version do I recommend? Most of my customers are in Plus. I get, if they don't have inventory or budget needs, job costing, inventory, or budget needs, I typically get them started in Essentials because I particularly value accounts payable, like managing bills. I value time tracking users. I value multiple user environment and recurring transactions. So I particularly get people started in Essentials if I'm not sure, because you could always go up pretty easily. But the majority of my clients now, it's 80%, are in Plus because we use budgets with almost everyone. Okay. Just like to me, the best thing you can do for a customer is help them do a budget, and QuickBooks Plus is the one that has the budget. So that's the answer to what I use for the most part. Then let's talk about payroll a little bit. So if you don't use a third-party program like ADP or Paychex or some other payroll company, and you want to set up payroll through QuickBooks, you could go into the Workers tab. There's going to be two sub-tabs. One says Employees and one says Subcontractors or Contractors. If you click on Employees and click on Get Started, it will take you through the process sign-up screen. Typically, you're paying around $50 a month for self-directed payroll and about $100 a month for full-service payroll. There's a variance depending on the number of employees, so that's why I said about. And both of these give you direct deposit. Both of these give you all the payroll tax forms and do all the withholding. The difference is enhanced payroll. You have to press a button to pay the taxes, and you have to press a button to file the forms. In full service, they actually mail the W-2s for the employees. They file them, and you don't have to remember to press anything, to pay anything. It's all done by the QuickBooks team. That's why it's double the price for the most part. Okay. So once you click on Get Set Up, you will turn on payroll and select the right version. And then, there's obviously not enough time to cover how payroll works, but that's how you do it within QuickBooks. The next thing would be to set up sales tax, really important. So we're going to click on the tax tab on the left-hand side, and then we're going to click on sales tax. Then we're going to click on set up sales tax. And really important, before you set up sales tax, a couple of tips. One is, are they doing multi-state sales tax? So you have to make sure you understand which states they have nexus in, which states they have to have a payroll tax set up for. Okay. Within states, there's counties sometimes or jurisdictions that would have different, or districts that would have different tax rates. So you have to create all those tax rates. You also have to go into products and services and figure out which products are taxable generally. So you want to mark them taxable. There's a little checkbox to mark them taxable. And then once you create the invoices, you have to make sure the invoices have the right tax rate on them. So they calculate the tax. And then you will go to the sales tax center to view your tax liability. As of now, QuickBooks is developing their automated tax system. So for the time being, you're going to be creating sales tax reports from QuickBooks, but not filing directly to the taxation and authorities from QuickBooks yet. So QuickBooks will track it, but you still have to do it through their website, right, or through their forms. Print out the form and do it by hand. So those are all really important questions to ask and to know about. So you know exactly where the sales tax triggers are. And if you know nothing about sales tax, obviously consult with a CPA or a sales tax expert. There are some articles here on the slides that you can read about what QuickBooks is doing in sales tax and some suggestions on sales tax. So the process of setting up sales tax, basically you're going to enter your address. You're going to enter whether or not you collect sales tax outside the state, so you can tell them which are the states. You're going to tell them the tax period, so are you a quarterly or monthly payer? When does the period start? I know in Florida we have calendar quarters, but in like New York they have these weird quarters that are not like January through March, right? So you have to tell it, what does that what does your frequency look like per state or per agency, and when officially you want QuickBooks to start calculating sales tax from, so the invoices of that date and beyond will be having sales tax. And this is what we were referring to earlier, where you can actually mark whether or not an item is taxable. So if the item is not taxable at all, you will remove that check mark. If they are taxable, QuickBooks will actually even ask you what type of product it is, because they're getting ready for their automated sales tax system that's going to update sales tax tables that are even by the item product category. Because in some states, you can have some products that are taxable and some that are not based on what they are. And these things can change from year to year, potentially. Okay, so we're here at the last 10 or 15 minutes. Let's talk about some best practices for training and supporting your clients. So I think the most valuable thing that you have is to give your clients the student guide. So the student guide is, let me open it up here for it is. So this is the student guide. It's about a 100-page PDF manual. It was built by Intuit in partnership of other pro advisors, and you can go through it, and it explains everything step by step. So how to create an account, what everything means pretty much, where all the settings mean, how to create users, list, import, top navigation bar. I mean, this is very, very thorough document. So you want to give this to your client, and this is like the manual. I'm doing air quotes. It's the manual, right? Because people always ask for the manual. So you want to do some great value add. You print that manual for them. This is copyrighted by Intuit, so I don't know how they feel about you putting your logo in it. I guess as long as you don't remove the credits and the copyright, I guess it shouldn't be an issue for you to put your logo on it. But this is a QuickBooks built PDF. So you're going to be able to access that straight from the Pro Advisor portal. If you somehow cannot find the link, use that link that is there on the screen, bit.ly/QBO training 2018. So I just made it like super simple for you to access. So it's bit.ly/QBO training 2018. Okay. So if you click on that, or what is it, QBO training? If you type that up in your browser, you should be able to download that. Worst case scenario, if you have some sort of issue getting it, just email me, and I will help you with that. But once you click on that link, it should take you straight to download the file. But by the way, that's always going to be on the Pro Advisor resources page. I just uploaded it there to make sure that people have a way of doing that. Okay, so you want to show people the workflow. So you want to sit with your customer and say, okay, here's the invoice process. We're gonna create an invoice. We're gonna receive a payment. We're gonna deposit. You want to walk your client through the entire workflow. So and have them ask you questions in the process. I find that to be one of the most valuable things that you can do, is to have your customers ask you questions in the process to say, well, what do you mean by that? Why didn't that work? That sort of thing. You want that. Okay. So you want your clients to question the workflow and the process and all that stuff. Show them on everything. I would do a sales process. So invoice, payments, deposits, and then banking, and then a expenses process. So enter the bill, pay the bill, print the check, reconcile it with the bank. Usually yes. Oh, okay. It's on the PowerPoint. So I haven't moved the slide. Do you see it now? Okay. Okay. Yeah. The slides didn't change, so it was the same exact slide we were on before. Okay. Anyway, that was the second point about the workflows, and you want to consider. I'm not sure if that's always a good suggestion, but consider downloading the app. There's an app you download in the computer, in a Mac or a Windows screen. Consider downloading that if customers are a little bit more used to working with a native app instead of a browser. Otherwise, Google Chrome works great, for accessing QuickBooks Online. But for some people, when they're used to a desktop type of application, that could work. But you will be really surprised at how many people prefer to use the browser over a desktop application. That's something that's going to, vary in preference. So you can always consider the app. The app really was meant to bridge the gap between like the desktop users and the online users. Okay. And then also be available for questions and follow up. Of course, charge for that, right? I would never do a conversion in which I'm going to tell the client, yeah, any questions you have, call me, and I'm not charging for it. Right? So usually a conversion, we charge a dollar amount that includes the actual conversion, the adjustments, the training, and the follow up for a specific period of time. I would say that's a really good best practice to have. And so again, there's my email. If for whatever reason something wasn't clear, I can answer that. And you want to be on top of all the QuickBooks webinars are available. QBTrainingEvents.com is going to show you everything that's available. Strongly consider all the webinars. If you're just getting started, definitely consider going to the conference in November. QuickBooks Connect is one of my favorite things. My favorite time of the year, literally, is to go to the QuickBooks Connect conference in San Jose, California. There's virtual conferences you can attend. I mean, Intuit does a really fabulous job. I don't work for Intuit. I'm completely independent. They do a really fabulous job at providing educational content. And I think just the opportunity is there to get educated, to understand this, to serve your clients, and hopefully grow your business with QuickBooks Online. All right. I think we're all set here. No more pending questions. So thank you very much, folks. Have a wonderful rest of your day.